I am Jana. I am in Portland, Oregon. I have a 9-year-old son, and I am a surrogate with Northwest Surrogacy Center. I'm also a psychologist working with pregnant people and in their whole pregnancy and postpartum. And if I look down, it's because I'm looking at specific questions that are coming in. So if you had questions, just pop them right in anytime during this webinar. I'm happy to answer all your questions and just talk about my experience and anything you might want to know. So, yeah, so just do that anytime. I'm here with Carla, so she's going to feed me questions too. That's who you just heard. I had a baby in March for a gay couple in the Bay Area, and I am matched again with a gay couple in Portugal. So that's where I'm at in my journeys. And I think the first question is, what made me want to be a surrogate? So I have many people in my life who really struggle to get pregnant and have a family. And I had a really easy time getting pregnant, and I had a really easy pregnancy. I had an amazing birth. And so I thought, why not do this to help someone? I just really wanted to be part of somebody's story and help somebody have and grow their family. So that's why I became a surrogate. And how did I find Northwest Surrogacy Center? So I actually met a surrogate at just like a picnic, a friend of a friend, and she was pregnant at the time. And so we started talking, and she was a surrogate with Northwest Surrogacy Center. So that's how I found them. Did my friends and family support me? Yes, they absolutely did. I think that most of my family was quite nervous for me. They had some misconceptions. They thought I would get really attached to the baby, that I might just have pregnancy complications or birth complications. And so they were more worried for me. But once they understood that I really wanted to do this, they supported me all the way. Let's see, what other questions do we have? What the IVF process is like. Every clinic is going to have their own protocol. So just because this is what my protocol was like doesn't mean that's what your protocol would be like. But so I went on birth control for, I want to say a month or two before the actual IVF process. And that's so they can time your cycle more clearly. And then I went on Lupron, which suppresses like your own hormones, and then estrogen shots. And then about a week before transfer, I started progesterone and oil, daily shots. And then that and the twice weekly estrogen shots lasted through, I want to say, 10 or 11 weeks of pregnancy. And so during the cycle, you have weekly, or I had weekly appointments where they check your lining to see if it's thickening the way that they want and if your hormones are at the level that they want to basically simulate ovulation without you actually ovulating. And then at about the 4-week mark is when usually your transfer happens. And then about 9 days after that, you check if you're pregnant. Were you nervous for the transfer? Absolutely. I was very nervous. I think one of the biggest things that I didn't anticipate was how anxious I would feel during the whole journey, just because you feel so much responsibility for getting pregnant and having a healthy pregnancy and healthy delivery for other people, right? You're not carrying for yourself, which can come with its own anxiety already, but knowing that you're doing this for another person or another couple just adds a layer of responsibility and an anxiety that I didn't quite anticipate. So yes, I was very nervous. And then the first transfer didn't actually take. The pregnancy didn't grow the way that it was supposed to. And for the second transfer, I ended up not actually testing. And like myself, I waited for the betas, and that was a lot better for my mental health. So just going about my life like nothing was happening. And that was the right choice for me. How did your relationship develop with the first family? So I feel like Northwest Surrogacy Center does a really good job asking you up front of what you're hoping for and then matching you with intended parents that want the same thing. So we all went in knowing that we were hoping to develop a good friendship and relationship. And so we FaceTimed each other, we texted. Those were mostly the means of communication. Sometimes we would just have a regular phone call, but those were usually the choices that we made. And so over time, we built a relationship like we just talked about what we were doing that week, or how my son's extracurriculars were going, or what they were up to. And so with several months of doing that, you just become really good friends. So now we're very good friends. We visit each other. They came here to visit. We've been down to see them and the baby since she was born a couple times. And yeah, it's just been really wonderful. Did you have any preferences about the family you picked? So I really wanted to work with a gay couple for a few reasons. I wanted to just support the LGBTQ community because they're having a hell of a time trying to build their families. Like sometimes it's still really hard for them to adopt in some states. And obviously they need the help if they want to have their own genetic child. That was my preference. Let's see. How did you talk to them about surrogacy? To my family and friends? I just told them that I wanted to help another family have a baby. That's basically how it started out. I clarified for them that I was a gestational carrier, so that I wasn't going to be genetically related to this child, which was like an aha moment because I think a lot of people don't really understand that you're not related. And that also helped my friends and family feel better about it as well. And yeah, then I would just let them know where I was in the process and what I needed in terms of support. What was the pregnancy like? Was it different than your own? Honestly, I have, knock on wood, the really easy pregnancies, pretty straightforward. I don't usually get nauseous or sick. What was different is because I was on the progesterone, I felt really tired the entire time that I was on progesterone. So I was really sluggish, fatigued. And initially, I did attribute that to being pregnant. But as soon as I stopped the progesterone, I felt so much better. And so that's what I just attributed to. So that was very different. At the same time, I was also almost 10 years older than when I was pregnant with my keeper. So that may have contributed as well. But other than that, pregnancies were pretty similar and pretty smooth sailing. Did you meet the family in person during the process? Yes, I met them when I had my first clinic visit. So usually you have an initial clinic visit where they check your uterus and they do some lab work and just like clear you medically from their end. Like usually you have some medical clearance going into a match, but they do like their own process. And during that appointment, because they also worked with a clinic in the Bay Area, they drove to the clinic, or no, they didn't drive to the clinic. We met at a restaurant, but we met during that time and then met again for the first transfer, second transfer, and then they came to visit during the pregnancy as well. And then I flew down to see them when I was pregnant as well. What was the birth like? So the birth was quite wild. Let's put it that way, because I providers tell people different things, but what my providers told me is to go to the hospital when contractions are 1 minute long, 5 minutes apart for 1 hour. That would be the signal that you're in active labor and to go to the hospital. And that never happened for me, meaning my contractions were all over the place for a good 16, 17 hours or so. And so they just never really got closer together. And at some point, I said, I think we need to go to the hospital. And I had called the like labor and delivery line to ask, and they were like, no, just like you can wait. But my dad was here to support me during that time. And so I told him, like, no, we should go. And so when we got to labor and delivery, we had just gone up the elevator and through the doors, and I hadn't even really checked in. There was just a triage nurse checking me out, so to speak. And 2 minutes later, she was already born. So it was that quick. And so, unfortunately, even though I had texted or called the IPs to tell them we were on the way to the hospital, because it was so fast, they were there about 5 to 10 minutes after she was born. So they missed it. But I got to be the one to hand them their baby. And that was the best moment ever. That was really beautiful to be the one to basically give them their baby. So that was really special. Tell us about your job working with pregnant women. Yeah, like I said earlier, I'm a psychologist, and one of the things I specialize in is perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. That means I support pregnant people through their pregnancy and postpartum time. And often that is when they feel a lot more anxiety, they're more irritable, they have racing thoughts. Maybe they feel sad and hopeless, and they just don't experience as much joy in the things they normally find enjoyable. So, postpartum, sometimes we talk about baby blues. About 80% of women or of people in the postpartum experience that. But if it lasts beyond 2 weeks, we talk about it as postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety. Some people also have OCD or sometimes even psychosis, that's a lot less common. And that is one of the populations that I work with. I really love working with pregnant people and supporting them through that time. And some of those pregnant people that I support are also surrogates. And I love doing that because I feel like it's a different experience talking to somebody who has also experienced surrogacy themselves. So I feel like I'm able to support them in a different way. And with surrogates specifically, they don't always, or maybe even most of the time, they don't actually have a diagnosis. They just need to talk through boundaries with their IPs because it's a very unique experience to have an experience in your body with a child that isn't yours. And so navigating what that looks like and how to communicate those boundaries with your IPs, how to make those decisions, what your values around it are, clarifying your needs, processing grief that you may feel around pregnancy loss or pregnancy complications or role shifts, especially after birth when everything quiets down and the IPs are obviously taking care of their baby and then the spotlight is not on you anymore. Those kinds of experiences are unique to surrogacy. And so I love supporting people through that. What could intended parents do to emotionally, support their surrogate? Honestly, talk to them often. Sometimes IPs get nervous that they might be overstepping or that they want to give the surrogate space. And I think over support rather than under support. The surrogate will happily tell you, like, oh, it's okay, I don't need anything, or I'm happy to talk to my friends and family or have other support. But I think waiting for the surrogate to ask for support may make the surrogate feel like maybe the MPs don't care. Obviously, it's not one size fits all, but that's been my experience, that it's better to reach out and check in than not to. That is not to say that, especially towards maybe birth, checking in often can also add pressure. So it's just like my earring just came out, but just asking your surrogate like what she prefers and what support is welcome. Did anything surprise you about your surrogacy journey? I've alluded to this earlier, but I think it did surprise me by how much responsibility and anxiety I would feel about carrying a healthy pregnancy and doing everything right and making good decisions and navigating that. Like that did happen to me, that there was a mismatch between my desire to have like physiological labor and birth and then the IP's desire for a more medicalized experience, meaning like they wanted an induction. And even though I feel like I have very good communication skills and we had a very good relationship, or we still have a very good relationship, that was really tricky to navigate and figure out, what to do because technically, since there weren't any medical reasons to induce, I had the ability to decline, but there was that nervousness around what if something were to happen? How would I be okay with that outcome? And yeah, that was something that surprised me because I didn't anticipate that's not something that I had considered talking about in the match meeting. Whether or not to have an induction is not something that was on my mind during that time. It was during my second match meeting, so I made sure that I was aligned with my second set of IPs on that question because I knew that was going to be really important to me. Other things that surprised me was how some people reacted, not necessarily close friends, but just like people on my periphery. They can say some really mean things and judgy things, and I didn't necessarily anticipate that. Did you get to hold the baby? Have you seen the baby since the delivery? Yes, I actually got to nurse her while we're in the hospital, and that felt really special. And the IPs we had were not exactly adjacent, but very close to one another. And so they would come over and hang out, and I would get to hold the baby. And so did my son. He got to hold her and have a relationship with her. And yes, we have gone to see them since and spent a long weekend together, and we get picture updates and videos, and yeah, I anticipate that we'll see her many more times. How did you talk to your son about surrogacy? So when I started the process, he was quite a bit younger because I started the process quite early, and then there were some delays because of travel plans and things like that. And so I used a lot of picture books. So we have one book in particular that I really like. It's called My Mom is a Surrogate. And you get to put pictures of the IPs in the book, and it talks about how you're basically helping another family. So he learned a lot about the reproductive system and IVF and how babies are made in a variety of different ways, and pregnancy and all of that. And he's a pretty science-minded kid, so he just learned a lot about the science, and he loves that we get to help other people. Did you feel supported by Northwest Surrogacy Center? Absolutely. I think that Northwest Surrogacy Center is doing an amazing job. They have in-person meetups for surrogates. They have like social media support groups, specifically a Facebook support group. They have something called Beyond the Surface, where if you are struggling, you can meet in like a smaller group with a social worker and talk about what's going on. And you also have your case manager, who's your go-to person, and you can always reach out and they will support you. I will say that some of these things can be a little bit of a mixed bag. For example, the Facebook group, like you really just have to try it out and see what works for you. For me, when things are going well, I love that group. It feels wonderful to share with fellow surrogates and connect. And when things are a little bit harder, I feel like it can just be a mixed bag of the responses that are maybe well intended, but aren't always what you need to hear. For example, when I had my negative pregnancy tests, people might have responded with, "Oh, I got a positive on day 4 or on day 5." And I'm like, yeah, that's not what I need to hear. So I was very intentional about not using that type of support for the second transfer. But I really love the in-person support groups, or it's not necessarily a support group, in-person meetups and hangouts. And it just feels really lovely to, yeah, connect with other women who get it and who are going through the same thing, even if they're not going through the exact same thing. When and why did you decide to do a second surrogacy? I feel like the moment when I saw the dads just do skin to skin with their baby girl and how happy they were and how in love they were, I was like, okay, I want to do this again. And then I didn't say that out loud to anyone. That was just the thought that I had. And then I gave myself time to like really process the experience, see how I was healing and recovering. And after a while, I was like, yeah, I recovered. I didn't have anything really negative to say about it. And that's when I reached out to my midwife and asked if she would support a second surrogacy journey. And she said, let's talk at I think she said like at the 6 months mark. And we did. And at that point, she said, yes, she would be supportive. And that's when I reached out to my old case manager and said, I want to do this again. Okay, this is our final question. Do I have advice for surrogates starting the process? So I feel like sometimes this sounds a little bit like a cop out, but my honest answer is do your research. That means take your time. Don't rush the process. That is, if you're talking to Northwest, ask them what journeys did not go well, what surrogates struggle with that they've worked with, what common issues arise, or what concerns are brought up the most. Ask questions about how long will I be on medication? What sort of side effects, or not side effects, that's more like a medical question, but just ask anything and everything. There's a bunch of podcasts surrounding surrogacy that I would advise listening to. Watch webinars, talk to other surrogates. If you don't know, where to find them, literally social media is a great place for that. And yeah, take your time. Don't rush it and get clear on why you want to do this, because you really like when it gets a little bit like when there's a lot of waiting or there are complications, or maybe this isn't something that happens frequently, but some surrogates do lose their uterus, for example, after complications and birth, let's say, because they've had placenta accreta, for example. Are you done with your own family building? Yeah, again, what's your why? What's your motivation around this? What are your needs and what are your boundaries around it? You may have a change about this later on, like you may have more information as you're going through the journey, but have a solid basis going into it. Okay. Thank you for joining us. If you have other questions that didn't get answered, just reach out to Northwest and ask them, and they're happy to talk to you several hours and walk through all your questions. Okay, thank you for joining. Bye.